I'll assume you watched the patch preview stream and have at least some clue to what's going on.
Roy and I do not hate each other.
Combination of words, warrior, PvP and improvements is something I wish to hear and I didn't expect to feel disappointed by. Most of these changes seem to come from place of misguided care, but with double emphasis on the word misguided. We of course don't have developers' entire mind laid out before us. As far as I know, Hydrated One might play 5D chess in his head, because if I had ability to read minds of people on other side of the world, I probably wouldn't be a Groggin warrior main. Anyhow, so far all we have in terms of insight into dev's intent regarding warrior is this quote.
Is there kind of a vision for Power Berserker in PvP that we have?
I don't know if we have a specific vision. I don't know if we have a specific vision.
I couldn't make it up, even if I wanted. Lack of vision is quite apparent if we look back at the most changes from previous patches, and from this one as well. Previously, we had changes like adding forced delays to Dragon Slash, and here we have damage buffs to facilitate builds that lack everything except damage. The only thing in this patch objectively good is rush tracking improvements.
11 years in the making.
That said, they might end up being unnoticeable in regular gameplay, as the skill not bugging out is a welcome change, but it is also something that is expected from the skill. On top of that, rest of the changes are hit or miss, leaning heavily towards the latter. Starting with 100 blades, getting increased power coefficient per strike from 0.35 to 0.4 in PvP only, and also increased the final strike power coefficient from 0.8 to 1.0 in PvP also. These are 15 and 20% damage increases respectively, which are substantial. However, damage never was a problem with 100 blades. The problem was that it prevents from moving for entire channel duration and also takes a longer half of a bloody century to go off. When you start channeling 100 blades, most often your enemy just does a step backwards and introduces you to every ranged damage skill he has access to, or does a step forward because you can't turn around either, and so your back is a free real estate. Buffing the final hit's damage also won't help anyone in PvP, as the aforementioned comes after 3.5 seconds, which is longer than all CC warrior has access to, with exception of Backbreaker landed on a weakened target, and there's already a much better follow-up that takes almost 5 times less time built into hammer skills. The only sensible way to land final hit of 100 blades is headbutt into Berserk into 100 blades, because you need both CC and quickness to even have a chance at landing it. And even this banks on your opponent not having a stun break available. Cleaving bodies on the ground to prevent enemy rally isn't realistically a place to shine for this skill either, as downed people still have their skills, and there's a class that can revive while fully invulnerable, because fuck everybody else, I guess. Therefore, we end up with a skill which in realistic scenario can hit more than 3 hits only against CC'd opponents, and practically never can hit the final hit, and therefore we buff damage of said final hit that never lands. If I have to play against disabled kindergarteners to utilize a buff, then what's even the point of this buff? Currently, using 100 blades against a skilled opponent is comparable to getting hit with an Immobilize, and thanks to duration of this skill being longer than my life expectancy, using it off cooldown for entire duration without interrupting it means you spend 30% of the time playing unable to move. Nevertheless, the same bloody patch, Zealot's defense gets a change that allows player to move while casting it. Zealot's defense is a ranged skill which blocks projectiles from front, which means it needs the ability to move much less than 100 blades, because enemy walking 2 feet away from you doesn't make the skill stop doing damage, and even if you aren't in range of your foe, it still blocks projectiles. Letting Guardian move during Zealot's defense is a good and welcome change, but why does it get set treatment and 100 blades doesn't? Because it would be too much damage on a 2-shot of a cooldown? Then why, on the Joko's dry, decrepit arse, we buff its grogging damage? For the love of hydrated one, I can't be the only person that sees a flaw in this. Anyhow. Next, are damage buffs to Savage Leap, coefficient going from 1.15 to 1.35, while its cooldown goes down to 7 seconds, and Final Thrust with its unempowered damage going from 1.0 to 1.5. This at least makes sense in regards to hybrid builds, and makes Sword more of a desirable choice for purely power builds. Biggest impact here, in my opinion, is the Savage Leap cooldown change, as that affects Warrior's mobility, and makes the damage in question also available more often. Not to mention, cooldown of Sword skills can be reduced even further with Blade Master trait. This is the most significant buff for Warrior in this patch, followed closely by Last Stand getting barrier increased to 1900. Stance builds are already the most competitively viable builds Warrior has. Condi Zerker hinges on stances. All viable versions of Power Zerker do so as well, and even builds that don't run stances as their main utility slot them often because 3 of them are stun breaks and 2 make you damage immune for a duration. You buffed the strongest Warrior build currently available already 3 separate times. What next? You gonna directly buff Skull Grinder? At least these are only power coefficients. That said, you can't reduce your power below 1000, and Rabbit Amulet comes with 900 power on it, so this is still going to be a noticeable damage increase for Condi Berserker, and completely unnecessary to add to that. Current main pain points for Power Zerker are that everything other than damage is rather poor. Low damage isn't the problem here. It never was, it never will. The problem is that we ask class with 0 instant gap closers and no pre-built defense utility and no animation-free defenses in its weapons to go full glass cannon, and we are staring in shock in disbelief when that glass cannon gets one-shot by another glass cannon but with access to stealth, better range, better mobility and a dog for good merit. Warrior needs sustain and survivability to thrive in PvP. So far, the greatest buff to Power Berserker was Arms Change, allowing him to play with Valkyr Amulet, so he's harder to one-shot. But still, he has to part ways with defense or discipline, so either with Hammer traits, Stance traits and Adrenal Health, or with 5 seconds weapon swap and the best cleanse he can get. Warrior builds live off of their survivability, because if we tell this brick outhouse to go full glass cannon, all he's going to do is get memed on by classes with one-shot combos out of stealth. And that's also why Wild Blow Change is going to miss the mark. Because to equip a skill specifically catered to beating one specific thing means I'm not equipping a skill that helps me fight everyone else in the same slot. I don't know what skills will my opponents have, so I can't guarantee before match that anyone will even have a block to begin with, and interrupting a player channeling Shield of Courage, Shield of Wrath or Arcane Shield doesn't make the block disappear. So in 3 examples where Warrior needs an unblockable the most, this skill doesn't do shit. But it asks me to forgo equipping something that would help me no matter what. You know Sight Beyond Sight, the skill that isn't worth taking even against the very thing it's supposed to counter? Wild Blow will end up in the same situation. This patch's set of Warrior changes fails at nearly everything it is set out to accomplish. Unless, of course, the only goal was to disappoint Warrior mains. Crabface out.